Hi everyone, thanks so much for being here. My name is Kat and I make houseplant videos here on Good and Planty. If you just happen to absolutely love this video, please consider liking it, commenting, subscribing, or following me on Instagram. All of these things help me grow my channel like a plant. Today we are talking all about how to take care of the rattlesnake CALATHEA, as well as how to troubleshoot some of the common problems that arise with this plant. Crispy tips. This video will include water, light, humidity and temperature, soil and repotting, propagation, fertilizing, and I think that's it. I will have the time codes pop up on the screen here, and if I mention any products, they are more than likely linked in my Amazon store, which is linked down below in my description box. These plants are part of the Marantaceae family of plants. These plants are fairly easily recognizable. You see that they have these crinkly, long, beautiful leaves that mimic a rattlesnake's tail when it does that thing. The underside of their leaves have this beautiful dark purplish color, and the front side is light green with dark green spots. This specific plant was sent to me in partnership with Cellar Door Plants, an online plant store that also has subscription options. If you would like to check them out, I will have them linked down below in the description box, and you can also use code GOODANDPLANTY for 15% off. This is a beautiful plant. All right, let's talk about water, which is one of the most important areas of care for the rattlesnake CALATHEA. This plant is definitely not drought tolerant, so definitely aim to keep it moderately moist with only the top few inches of soil drying out between waterings. You don't want to go to the other extreme, however, and keep this plant in drenched and soggy soil. Otherwise, the roots will start rotting in that excess moisture, and then you will end up with root rot, which no one ever wants. Instead, when you notice the first few inches of soil drying out, give it a very thorough drench, and then let all of the excess moisture and water drain through the drainage holes at the bottom of your pot. In the winter time, you will probably notice that your plant needs less water because it is expending less energy due to the fact that there is less sun. You will probably need to pull back on watering during the winter months. If you are not giving your rattlesnake CALATHEA enough water, you will most likely see some droopy leaves, crispy tips, and eventual leaf loss. If you are giving your plant too much water, you will most likely see yellowing leaves, soil that is not drying out adequately enough between waterings, and if you unpot the plant, you will probably see some black, soft, easily breakable roots. And all of that is a sign of root rot. If you want more information on root rot, I have a whole separate video on it that I will link here. That usually happens from overwatering, which is also pretty common with these plants because everyone tells you you need to keep them adequately moist, but I definitely want to put a red flag here because you can totally overwater your rattlesnake CALATHEA. Let's talk about light. So these plants can be considered low light tolerant plants. However, I absolutely recommend putting it in bright and direct light for optimal growth. I think pulled back from an east or west facing window if you're in the northern hemisphere is ideal. However, there are definitely ways to make all of your light options work. For example, if you live in a very low light home, you can always invest in a grow light. If you live in a home with really strong light, I recommend keeping it away from any direct sunlight. If your plant is getting too much light, you will notice some bleached, burnt leaves. This beautiful coloration and these deep colors will fade away as it gets way too much light. It will also probably be drying out too fast between waterings because of that excess sun, and eventually you'll probably experience some leaf loss. A good way to tell if the issue is a light issue is if the problem is kind of isolated to the part of the plant that is facing the light source. If it's only, part of the plant that's grumpy and it's facing a window in that part, it's probably a light problem versus a watering problem. If your plant isn't getting enough light, you will find that the new growth is a lot smaller and it will probably be struggling to dry out between waterings. Humidity and temperature, another very important part to taking care of your rattlesnake CALATHEA. I would say keep this plant between 65 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, I have to look at my notes, 18 to 25 degrees Celsius. This plant absolutely adores humidity, so keep it in high humidity places like bathrooms, kitchens, in clusters with other plants, anything that is really going to boost the moisture in the air around the plant. An absolutely ideal placement for this plant is near a humidifier that is kept between probably like 50 to 65% humidity. This is one of those plants where you are very, very likely to experience crispy tips if it's not getting the humidity it wants. Like all tropical plants, I do recommend keeping it away from any hot or cold drafts like radiators, leaky windows, doors, you get the deal. Soil and repotting. So to ensure that the frequent watering that we talked about before doesn't lead to any form of rot, you will definitely need a well-draining soil mixture. I use a mixture of 60% coco coir, 20% pumice, 10% orchid bark, and 10% worm castings. I also have a whole video on my soil mixture if you want to go ahead and watch it. When it comes to pot selection, for most Calathea, I typically recommend using a pot that has a moisture retaining material. So for example, plastic nursery pots like this one are very ideal, as well as ceramic pots. Just make sure that they have drainage holes at the bottom so that there is an escape for excess water. You can also use terracotta. However, you'll probably notice that you need to water your plant a lot more frequently. So just know your watering habits and your routine and all of that to make the best pot choice for you. And you can always tweak the soil mixture to make it make more sense for you and your pot choice. For example, if you're using a terracotta pot, you might want to pull back on the pumice or perlite additive to your soil mixture just to like make it a little bit more dense and moisture retaining. The time to repot this plant is when you see roots starting to poke out of the drainage holes at the bottom of the pot, or if water is running through the pot way too quickly and the soil isn't even absorbing any of the water that you're pouring in, that is a sign that your plant probably needs fresh soil. When you do repot, only go up like an inch or two is typically my recommendation. Yeah, and you should be good to go. Fertilizer. I personally use either Liquid Dirt, which is a plant food, or Espoma's balanced fertilizer to fertilize my plants. That's pretty much all of my plants, not just the rattlesnake Calathea. If you're using Liquid Dirt, you can use that every single water throughout the year since it's a very gentle plant food. If you're using something like a balanced fertilizer from Espoma, for example, I always just follow the bottle for frequency directions and then dilute it a little bit stronger than what the bottle recommends. Only fertilize your plant when it is actively growing and actually using the nutrients in the soil and it needs to be replenished. Fertilizer is not a band-aid for a problematic plant. You will most likely need to stop fertilizing during the winter months as long as the plant growth is slowing down. However, again, if you are using Liquid Dirt, you can use that year round since it's a plant food and not like a strong fertilizer. If you are over fertilizing your plant, you could potentially burn the root system. So always make sure that you're heavily diluting it and fertilizing only when the plant is growing. Last but not least, let's talk about propagation. So the best way to propagate this plant is definitely through root division. Unfortunately, I cannot do a demo on this plant because it is still acclimating to my home, and if I disturb it too much right now, I will definitely have a cranky plant. But this concept is very similar to how you would propagate a snake plant or a spider plant, both of which I do have demos on my channel for, so if you want to see kind of like a related example, I would definitely check those videos out. The best time to root divide is when you are repotting a plant. You basically just want to find a chunk of the plant that has a developed root system that you can kind of like gently massage away from the rest of the plant, and then you take that developed plant and just pot it separately into the same potting mix that we discussed earlier. Boom, you have another rattlesnake Calathea. It's honestly one of the fastest ways to propagate because you don't have to wait for root growth or anything like that. You just separate, pot, and you're good. And that is pretty much everything I have to say on the rattlesnake Calathea. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, thank you to Cellar Door Plants for sending me this absolutely stunning plant. If you want to check them out, I will have them linked down below in the description box, and you can use code GOODANDPLANTY for 15% off your order. If you have any questions about this plant, you can drop it down below in the comment section. I will do my best to answer you. And honestly, huge shout out to all of my subscribers and commenters that go down there and help each other out with questions that I can't always get to. You guys are amazing, and I love the community we build in the comment section, so thank you. Please like this video, hit that notification bell, check out my merch, all that good stuff, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!